So you want procedurally infinite generation of the backrooms in Unity. I got you. First off, though this tutorial is beginner friendly, if you run into any errors that you cannot solve, let me know in my Discord server and we will work something out. Also, if you get really stuck and can't continue, you can find and download the source code on my Patreon page. Okay, in Unity, we're going to go ahead and create new. Let's name our project Procedural Generation. I'm going to be using the universal render pipeline, but you can use 3D, it doesn't really matter. Also, the version of Unity that you use does not matter since everything that we're going to be doing is in the back end. So let's go ahead and press create. Okay, so now that we are in our game, we need to go ahead and right click in our assets window, create, and create a new scene. Let's name this scene Procedural. Actually, let's just name it main. Main is pretty simple. I'm going to drag this into my scenes folder and let's go ahead and open it up. And now that we are in a new scene, we need to simply create a new empty game object, call it the Generation Manager. And let's duplicate this and make another thing here called the world grid. I'm going to make the world grid have a little icon here. And I'm going to give the Generation Manager another icon with the same color. Now, most importantly, I'm going to drag both of these to 0, 0, 0 on the transform. And there we go. The world grid needs to be at 0, 0, 0 so that when we actually build our scene, it starts at 0, 0, 0 because our rooms and our actual generation is going to happen within the world grid. The world grid is going to be the parent object of our rooms. So now let's hop over to our Generation Manager, add components, new script, and let's call this the Generation Manager. Very creative. And create and add the new script. And this is going to be the script that controls the majority of the generation, actually all of the generation of our game. Before we create this script, it is important for you to understand what this code is actually going to do. First of all, we want this script to generate rows that will form this type of grid. In doing this, the Generation Manager creates boxes, which later will turn into rooms. All of these rooms will be different and are actually going to contribute to our maze generation later on, but we'll get to that later. In order for our script to generate rooms, it needs to know how big our map size is going to be. For example, if our map size is 16, our script knows that it needs to generate 16 rooms. However, it is not as easy as just giving the map size a number that comes out of the blue. Our number of rooms that we want our map to generate needs to be a square number, basically a number that has a square root. For example, in this case, 16 has a square root of 4, meaning that whenever our map generates rooms and it gets to the 4th room, our map knows to go back in the row, back to the front, and then go up a little bit. This means it's gone to the next row and can start generating up. After it does this a few more times, precisely the square root of 16 more times, then we've created a type of square. This is a square. This only occurs because there are 16 smaller squares, and 16 is a square number. If it was any other number that was not a square number, it wouldn't work, and in fact, it would probably crash your game. Now, the math of this is actually pretty simple. The column size and the row size are simply the square root of the square number, like I said previously. So if you count now, each column and each row has specifically 4 boxes in them. This means that the column size and the row size are each going to be the square root of the square number, which is 4. In this example, we've set the we set the map size to 9. Therefore, the column size is now going to be the square root of 9. That gives us 3. And the script will now generate 3 boxes going vertically, meaning we have 3 columns. Next, we set the row size to the square root of 9, which is going to be 3. meaning the script generates 3 rows or 3 boxes going across horizontally. This now means that once we fill in all of the gaps, we have a square of 3 by 3, which means our map size is exactly 9. In this next example, we've set the square number or the map size to be something that is not a square number, or something that does not have a square root that comes out to be an integer. In this case, we've set the column size to be the square root of the square number and the row size to be the square root of the square number, which is 8. This gives us a float of 2.8284271247, which is not an integer, it's a float. So now when our script tries to generate rooms, it will of course generate the first room, the second room, and now it expects to get to the square root of 8, which is 2.82, but it doesn't get to that number. So theoretically, it should keep generating infinitely, which the script doesn't know how to do, so it would crash your game. This just expresses the fact that the map size needs to be a square number. After putting this logic into place, we can see that the map size needs to be an integer, the column size and the row size also need to be an integer, and they need to be equivalent to the square root of the square number, of course. And the square number needs to have an integer square root, which is what gives it the quality of actually being a square number. This is why when we put in 16, it works, because the square root of 16 is 4, which is an integer. But if we put in 8, it doesn't work, because the square root of 8 is 2 point something, and that's a float. So for now, when we code our script, we're going to keep the row size, we're going to keep the map size as 16, because that's the easiest number to work with. And for now, we're going to keep that hard-coded, but later on we will add a slider to change the value of this. Upon setting our map size to 16, when we generate our map and do all the coding, we will find a grid that looks like it's 4 by 4, and if we count, you'll see that each of them add up to 16. So let's get to coding. So the first thing that we want to do is go ahead and hop over to our Generation Manager script, which should be attached to our Generation Manager object. So let's just double click this, and it should open up Visual Studio, and we'll see that we have a nice blank canvas here for us to work on. And we're going to go ahead and for now just delete these 2 methods, and let's start working on the first actual bit that we need to do to make this script. So most importantly, we're going to want to go ahead and create a reference to our world grid, which is the parent of our actual objects here. So let's create a world grid. And when I say objects, I'm referring to the rooms that I was talking about during the actual explanation. Next, it's important that we go ahead and create our room prefab reference. So this is going to be a reference to room prefab, and this is going to be the actual prefab that we spawn in as a type of room. And previously in the clip, I showed it as just boxes on a screen, but we're of course going to change those into floors and roofs and all kinds of stuff that's going to be going on. But for now, let's just keep it as room prefab. So the first thing we want to do is create a public void, and we're going to create generate world. So this is going to be the actual method that creates the world when this is clicked. And so this is actually going to be pretty important. And I also want to reference the Unity engine.scene management so that I can create another reference or another method here that says reload world. And I'm going to actually just zoom in here so you can see a bit better. And I'm going to create this reference to, I'm going to make this method say scene manager dot load scene, scene manager dot get active scene dot name. So basically what this is going to do is this is just going to reload the world so you can make a new one. So essentially when we create our giant procedurally infinite grid of the backrooms, we might want to create a different world with different settings. So that's what this reload world is going to be used for. Now we're going to have to create some integers here. And let's start off with the public int rooms to generates. And for now, let's create the, I'm going to rename this to map size since it makes more sense. and let's keep that at 16. And this is the size of the map. So as explained in that slide, on those slides from earlier, it's important that the map size is actually a square number. So to ensure that we have just the square root of this at all times, I'm going to create another reference to map size square. And essentially what this is going to do is this is going to be the square roots of map size. And now let's go ahead and hop over to void update. And this will allow us to constantly set the map size square to be equal to the casted integer value of mathf dot square roots map size. So this will basically just give us the integer value of the square root of the map size. So again, if it is not an integer and a square number, then it's gonna crash the game. So make sure for now that this is 16. Just make sure it's 16. Now we want to actually start getting our world in here, and to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new private vector2. Let's do vector3, and I'm going to say current position. Now this is the current let's just put a comment in here. The current position of the room to be generated. And I might as well comment these as well. This is the parents of the rooms. And this is, we'll change that later. So yeah, this is going to be the current position of the room that will be generated. And this will make a lot more sense later. But for now, let's just kind of put these integers in here. I also want to put another integer for current pause x, current pause z. And these are going to keep track of our position of the room to be generated. Now the last integer we need in here is going to be another integer, and this is going to be let's say the position tracker. Now this keeps track of the position of our generator. There. So a lot of this will make it more sense later when we actually start coding. So I think if you don't understand, then kind of just keep going along, and hopefully things will start to make more sense slowly. So with that being said, let's hop over to our generate world method here. And the first thing that we want to do is create let's create a for method. And I want to say the max is going to be the map size. And for now, we're going to keep everything the same elsewhere. Now, just to show you what this actual, what this script is going to pretty much be doing, I'm just going to show an example here. And for this example, I'm going to say instantiate, let's say room prefab, and let's say the current position and quaternion dot identity. And then we also want to pass in the parent as the world grid. So this is going to basically just create a room for the amount of times that's in the map size. So when we run this script, we should see that 16 room prefabs are created. And I kind of just want to show what we have going on here, just to show step by step before I just jump into it and start creating the grid mechanic. So let's hop back over to Unity, and we're going to go ahead and create a new canvas just so that we can make a button that calls that method. So let's go to UI and make a canvas, and I'm going to go ahead and press 2D mode here, and let's scroll out so that we can actually see this, and there we go, boom. So I'm going to go ahead and immediately turn this to scale of screen size with 1920 and 1080 as the reference resolution, and I'm going to go ahead and create a button inside of this. So create a button, and I think I'll put this at around the top left of the map or canvas here. I think that looks fine. I'm not really going to be perfecting this this UI a whole lot, just because I don't really want to go too in depth on making the UI look good. But I am going to get rid of this UI sprite, since the UI sprite typically makes the buttons look worse, and I will make the highlight color green. Actually, I'll make the normal color green, just because green is a pretty nice color. So I'm going to hop into button. I'll change the name of it to generate button. And down here in the onClick method, I'll add a new method here, and I'll assign the generation manager to the object here. And I'll change function to GenerationManager.reload or generate world. Before we can press play though, we do need to assign our references to the generation manager. So let's go ahead and click on generation manager here. And we want to go ahead and assign or drag the world grid over to world grid, assign the room type. And to make this, actually, we do need to make a new prefab. And it's just gonna, for now, it's just gonna be a square. So just go ahead and make a new empty object. And inside this empty object, we're gonna go ahead and put a square in it. A cube. And now we can just say, we can just call this room type and drag this into our assets window. I'll go ahead and delete this from the scene now, and I'll assign our room type over to room type. So this is going to be temporary, but for now it'll do a pretty good job at showcasing what we have going on here. And now let's go ahead and press play. So let's press play, and if we hit our button that we probably should have changed the text of, I'll do that later, we'll see that inside of our world grid it has about 16 room types, and currently there's no position that's being passed in here. So if I press F on them, as you can see, they're really far away in some weird position, but there are still 16 of them, and they're not in a shape of a grid. However, basic functionality has been made, 16 of them. And just to show that it actually does change with the map size, I'll just make it something really obvious like 4. I'll change the map size to 4. Now if I hop into play mode, I press play, and I go ahead and click button here. As you can see, sorry, I pressed it twice, but as you can see, it spawns in 4 room types. I just pressed it twice, so it spawned in 8, and if you press it, it spawns in 4 more every time. Now before I go back to the scene, I'm going to go ahead and change this button's text over, and I'm going to make it say generate. And I'm going to create one more button here. I'll call this one the reload button. I'm going to make this one say reload. I'm going to change the color to blue just to make it stand out. Now before we go back to the back end, it is important that we do one more thing, that we add one more thing to the canvas, that is. And it's going to be adding a slider that can change the map size for us. So let's go ahead and create a new slider here. I'm going to drag this up here in this corner and press F on it. And now I'll make it a bit bigger, bring it this way a little bit, make it a little bit bigger maybe. And I am going to come in here, oops, sorry, let me zoom out. I'm going to come in here and change the maximum value to 18. And I'm going to make sure that it's on whole numbers mode. It needs to be on whole numbers mode. We cannot use floats or else your game will crash. I'll also change the minimum value to 1. So now as you can see, we have a slider in here that is only accepting whole numbers from 1 to 18 and not 0, because 0 would break the game. So I'm going to change this to map size slider, and I'm going to add a text to it just to make it clear. And on top of the text, or on top of the slider, just like this, a little bit smaller maybe. You can play around with this a lot if you want. I'm just making really basic text right now. And I'm going to change this to say map size, just like that. And I'll change the text to say title. So there we go. We have a map size slider, we have a generate button, we have a reload button, and of course the map size slider and the reload button won't work yet, which is why we need to hop into the back end and kind of just finish up our basic map size map generation, that is. So let's go ahead and hop back over to our Visual Studio, and we want to go up to the top and we want to create a new reference, and let's say using Unity Engine.Scene Management, and we want to put Unity Engine.UI. So using Unity Engine.UI, and that will then allow us to create a new reference to a slider. So I'm going to say map size slider. And I'm also going to create a new reference to the generate button. Serialized field button generates button. And I'm going to go ahead and in the generate world method, I'm going to turn off the generate button .interactable equals false, just so that our generate button can't keep being pressed and instantiating more maps infinitely, like I showed earlier, where I kept pressing it and it kept generating more and more and more boxes, because that's not what we want. So let's go ahead and come into our for loop here, and we're going to make this look like a grid instead of just all being in one spot in some random position of the world. So to do this, I'm going to go ahead and say at the end of the for loop, I'm going to say current position x plus equals room size. And this is going to be the size of each of those cubes. And for now, I'm going to create a new integer up here that says private floats room size. And I'm going to set this to say, let's say 7. And this is basically the x and y value of those cubes. And each of them has to be the exact same, obviously. But it's important because in order for us to generate another box, it needs to go over on the x position by the room size so that it doesn't just keep generating inside of the other cubes. And I am going to change this current position x and current position z to a float instead of an integer. Now let's hop back into our for loop and let's start working on this grid mechanic here. We want to go ahead and say current position tracker plus plus at the end. Now inside of our for loop, we want to go ahead and say current position equals new, and this is going to say current position x 0 current position z, and let's put a semicolon. Now essentially what this is going to do is it's going to instantiate our room type at the current position instead of the world grid, which actually gives it a fixed position. So let's go ahead and change world grid here to current position, and we're going to say quaternion.identity, and we're also going to say world grid is going to be the parent. So this is going to instantiate at the position. Now we are not updating the z position yet, and to do that I'm just going to say if current position tracker equals the map size square, then I'm going to say the current position x is going to be 0, and this is going to bring it back to the beginning like I showed you earlier. Current position z plus equals room size, and the current position tracker should also be 0. So I'll go ahead and put this at the top next to current position x. There we go. So this is essentially just going to bring it back to the beginning, bring it up a little bit so that it can keep generating to the right. Now that was a lot. So just to recap on what we did, I'm going to put some comments. So let's come to this over here, and I'm going to say instantiates the room type at the current position. So, and I'm also going to come over here and say adds more position to the current position x, which makes it go to the left or right a bit more. And that's just going to bring it over to the side a bit more so that it doesn't just keep generating inside of itself. Current position tracker keeps track of the position x without using the room size. So whereas current position x uses the room size and takes in the room size, the current position tracker takes in just 1, 2, 3, 4, whereas room size is going to take in 7, 14, 28, and etc. So the current position, this is going to pass in our position, and this is just going to set move the position back to the beginning of the grid so it can go upwards instead of so it can go upwards. I think that's about it. So all right, and this is obviously, or I won't say obviously, I should never say obviously. This is going to reload the current loaded scene. So the reason partially also why I'm putting all these comments is because you can download the source code on my Patreon page. And the link for that will be in the description down below. But if you have really, really big problems that you cannot fix and that joining my Discord server to get help for doesn't help you fix, then you can always just download the source code for my Patreon page. Now that everything should be working in the back end, we have to go ahead and assign some things to our generation manager. So let's go ahead and open our canvas and assign the the generate button to generate button, the map size slider to map size slider, and I'm going to change the map size back to 16. And right, that does remind me that we haven't actually coded in the map size slider. So let's actually hop back over here. And before we generate the world, it's important that we set the map size to be equivalent to the map size slider.value. So let's go ahead and do this by coming into update and say map size equals map size slider, or actually, sorry, int mathf dot power map size slider dot value and comma 4. So this just ensures that no matter what our value is, it will always be a square root by just setting it to be the exponent of 4. Because any value to the exponent to the 4th power, that is going to automatically become a square number. So, and if it's not a square number as shown earlier in the explanation, it will crash your game because the script doesn't know how to generate things that aren't square numbers. So let's go ahead and hop over to our, actually I'm going to press F on this just to zoom in, and now we can actually see our scene here. And I'll turn the skybox back on, and let's press play. So what we should see when we press the generate button is a grid of 4x4. Oops, let's change this down to just, actually, so now that we're in our game, we can see that our map size slider is actively changing our map size in the inspector tab. So obviously when we have higher buttons, our map size is stupidly high, 104,000. I do not recommend putting your map size to be that high. For now, I'm going to put mine at 628. That is always the problem with using exponential numbers. They can get really, really big really fast. But I'll keep mine at 625, and I will press generate. And as you can see here, we have a grid of 625 cubes. And this, of course, only works because we're using a square number of cubes. Whereas if we were using a rectangular number, it would be a problem, this to say the least. So let's come back over to our game tab, press reload. Reload, sorry, that does actually bring up a problem. The reload button isn't reloading the scene. Let's go ahead and fix this really quick. We have to click into reload button, come down, change this on click method from generate world to reload world. Schoolboy error there. So let's hop back over into our scene and generate the world again with a smaller value this time. So as you can see, this generates 16 cubes, and there is a small problem here. As you can see, the cubes are just cubes, whereas we want them to be kind of terrain. For now, it really shows that it does generate, say, 16 if our map size is 16. But we don't want it to just be a bunch of cubes. That's not really too backroomy. So let's make it a floor here. And I think that's the first time anyone said the word backroomy. So let's hop into our room type in the assets window. And because we set the room size to be 7, I'm gonna actually change this to a public float. So I'll change room size to be a public float instead of a private float. But for now, we set our room size to be 7, meaning that each of our room types, the cube or the ground of it, needs to be 7 wide in each direction, 7 wide and 7 long. So now that our cube is 7 wide and 7 long, and if we come back into our game, you'll see that our room size is 7. it's going to create a type of floor effect. So let's hop into our game here, and I'll put this to some crazily big number, and I'll press generate. And as you can see, it basically has created a terrain. However, each of the terrain has smaller cubes within. And this basically allows us to create walls that are independent on each of these smaller cubes. And though there are some ways to do this using some simple maze generation, we're not making a maze. We're making essentially back rooms. Now the thing about maze generation is it will give you just one route to get to the center. However, in the back rooms, it's not really a maze. I mean, there's an exit. We're gonna add in an exit, but it's not really about getting to the exit. It's a giant labyrinth of just really insanity. So, whereas mazes, it's just one kind of hallway. Of course, you can make it bigger, but it's usually just one hallway. It leads to the exit. The back rooms is a giant, like, it's just rooms that will lead somewhere. They're not really leading anywhere. They're just rooms. So that's what we're essentially going to be doing now. We're going to start making this more random. Now to do this, I'm actually going to go into my assets window and create a new folder. Call it prefabs. And I'm going to drag the room type into the prefabs folder. Now if I click into the prefabs folder, we currently only have one room type. That's about to change. Let's rename this to room type underscore T0, as in type 0. And let's duplicate this, let's say 5 times. So now we have 6. And I'm going to change this one to type 1, change this one to type 2. I'll make this a bit bigger so you can see the text. I'll change this one to type 3, and type 4 over here, type 5 over here, and that's about it. So we have 6 of them, and I'm also going to create a new folder in here, call it materials. Actually, I don't really want to create a new folder. I'm just going to keep it all inside of this one folder here. Let's go ahead and create a new material here. And essentially what this is going to be doing is it's going to generate the script. We're going to tell the script to generate one of these random rooms types. Instead of just generating the one room, we can choose, the script can randomly choose which room type to spawn in. And the room types are essentially going to have walls, and each of the walls are going to be in a different orientation, which gives it the quality of being a room type. So I'm going to change this to say type 0, and I'll make about 6 of these, and I'm going to change these materials color accordingly. So I'll make this one red, I'll make this one green, I'll make this one blue, and of course this is completely temporary. We're going to change these to carpet textures later on, but I just want to show the functionality first before I just hop in and start doing it crazily. I'll make this one black here. And now if we come over to our types, we can assign their materials to each of the types, which is actually going to give them the quality of being a different type. So I'm assigning each of the materials right now, type 4 material and type 5 material. Now as you can see, each of the types has a different color. And I think just because I want yellow to be in here, I'll make it a 6th type, and I'll call this type 6. I'll give it a yellow material, or golden material, whatever you want to call it. Here we go. Okay, now we have a bunch of room types. We have a bunch of room types with different colors, and we can actually start coding in some functionality here. So let's hop back over to our script, and we just want to go ahead and change this game object to game object array. Actually, sorry, let's make this a list, and let's make it a list for game objects. And we want to make this say room types as a plural instead of just room type. And it shows us where we have to change our. Let's go ahead and change this to say room types random.range 0, room types.count. And that's just going to randomly choose one that's from 0 to the length of the room types. Alright, so that's going to randomly choose which one to generate. And I think that's going to be all the functionality that we need to code. So let's hop back over to Unity, wait for this to compile. And we have a new list here. Let's go ahead and lock this first. and select each of these by pressing this one and shift clicking the last one. I'll drag these all over here. Now they're all assigned, and if I go back into the game tab, I can press generate, and it will generate with the colors. Here we go. That is beautiful. This is essentially showing us that our script is randomly generating rooms. Now, right now, this would be a super dense map because each of these would be full of walls. And if you haven't seen the video where I made something like this, go ahead and check it out. It's where I made this in 3 days. I made procedurally infinite generation of the Backrooms in 3 days. I kind of explain this error here, where each of the walls, there's just no space in between them. It makes the Backrooms hard, claustrophobic, and difficult to just walk around. Now to do this, in that video, I explained a way in which I made a type of empty room. And the empty room spawned way more than most of these rooms, leaving for like big just gaps in the terrain. And I think we can go ahead and start doing that now. So let's create a new type. I'm going to call this room type E, and this is going to be the empty room type. And I'm going to go ahead and duplicate type 00, change this to say type E, and I'll change the color to brown, just like that. And inside of the room type here for type E, I'll assign the brown texture to it. Now we want to go back to our generation manager here, and we want to create a new serialized field game object reference to our empty room. Now this is the empty room type. We also want to create a new public integer for the emptiness, and I'm going to call this map emptiness. And this is going to be the chance of an empty room spawning in. And basically, the smaller this value is going to give it more of a chance of an empty room spawning in. And the higher this value is going to give it less of a chance of an empty room spawning in. This essentially allows us to control how many empty rooms spawn in, and therefore how empty or how dense our map is. So let's hop over to our generate world method here. And we want to go ahead and say, at the very beginning, the very beginning of this method, we want to say the for int I equals 0, I less than map emptiness I plus plus, and inside of here we want to say room types dot add empty, or sorry, e room, and this basically adds empty rooms to the room types array. So this will basically, again, just to reiterate, it will control how empty or how dense the map is. Okay. Now we can hop over to Unity here, and we can go over to our generation manager. Let's set the map emptiness to be like 5. That is a pretty high map emptiness. Actually, I'm going to set it to say 9, just so that it's super obvious about what's going on here. And I'll assign the room type E to the E room. The E room. Now I'll go ahead and press play. And once this finishes compiling, if we generate this or make this map size to be some super stupidly big number, like 38,000, and press generate, as we'll see, our map generates a whole lot of brown rooms, and the brownness of this map is essentially going to be the emptiness. And for each of these brown rooms, there's just going to be just empty space, which therefore allows our player to basically kind of navigate through this just insanity a little bit better. Because if there's no emptiness at all, there's no way they're going to navigate around the Backrooms. So I'm going to add another slider here, and I want the slider to control the map emptiness without having to change the hard-coded value of the map emptiness in the inspector. So I think that's pretty straightforward. I'm just going to drag these two buttons down a bit and create a new slider called the emptiness slider. Emptiness. emptiness slider. And I want to change the title to say map emptiness. Map emptiness. There we go. And I will allow for this slider to be 0, just in case we want to have a map that is completely not empty at. However, I don't recommend that you make that slider 0. It's not really gonna help your case a lot. And I will set the default values of these just so that we have some kind of default settings going on here. Now that we have that, let's go ahead and hop back over to our scripts. Create a new reference to a slider, call it the emptiness slider. Come down, and we want to go into our void update method. Say the map emptiness equals map emptiness slider. Map emptiness slider dot value. Gosh, I'm really messing up. Map emptiness equals, and sorry, we are going to have to cast this as an integer because our slider can potentially be a float, but we specifically made it say whole numbers only, so that shouldn't be a problem. Now that we have this working, let's go ahead and do one final test on our game for now before we hop into lighting. So we have some values here. Let's change, of course, values that aren't assigned. Let's assign the map emptiness to the emptiness slider. There we go. And we can save and hop back into our game now that our emptiness slider is assigned. So let's assign this map emptiness. Let's make it 18, which is the maximum. And screw it, I'm gonna make the map size the maximum, which is gonna be 104,000 boxes. I really do not recommend that you do this because it could even crash your computer. I might completely crash the recording right now. I hope it doesn't crash the recording. I'm actually going to save how much the progress that I have on this recording before I do this, just so that I don't crash it. I'll be right back. Alright, I am back. I have saved the recording. I made a backup. So let's go ahead and generate with the maximum value. And immediately my game has frozen. My mouse has turned into a spinning wheel. My script is trying to generate 104,000. And oh my gosh, did it actually work? I have 25 emptiness. Okay, I changed the map emptiness to also be maximum. And my goodness, that is giant. If I look away from it, I can move a little bit better. And oh my gosh, this is giant. This is giant. Wow. Okay, that's a pretty big map. This is essentially procedurally infinite generation of the Backrooms. As you can see, just for reference, if we go ahead and create a terrain, now this is just temporary, you don't have to copy me. But I went ahead and I made a terrain. And as you can see, this is the size of a terrain compared to the size of a map. And terrains are really they take a long time to cross on foot in a first-person controller. As you can see, our map is about 4 times the size of a terrain, a Unity terrain. So that really shows you how big our map size can possibly be, though I don't recommend generating it this big because of how laggy it will make your computer. Alright, so now that we have a map, it is time for arguably the most important part of the entire tutorial. You have to take a break. This is the next part of the tutorial. So if you don't take a break here, you'll be kind of dragging things on for yourself, and it could get pretty rigorous. So I highly recommend that before we go into the next part of this tutorial, you take a break. I don't know how long you want to make it. Just, I don't know, get food, get a sandwich, come back, and then you can finish the last bit of this tutorial. After this is going to be pretty straightforward. We're just going to create some lighting and maybe make these actual prefabs that have floors, textures, and of course, last but not least, we're going to add in our exits, our barriers, and I believe we can add in our player, and that will be the end. So take a break, and when you get back, we can continue the rest of this tutorial. Alright, welcome back. So the first thing that we want to go ahead and do is, as I said before, we're going to work on our lighting. And this is actually going to be pretty simple. We're just going to generate another layer on top of our rooms. That's called the lighting layer. And to do this, we're just going to go ahead and open our prefabs.
And we're going to want to make a new type here. So to do this, I'm just going to go ahead and for now just duplicate the room type, and I'm going to go into it. And as you can see, this is a room type and it has a floor in here. But the thing about our lighting is it's going to be a fluorescent light on the roof. So let's go ahead and change this to be more accurate. First of all, I want to change this to light type. And I want to go ahead and make this its own material here. So I'm going to say, I'm going to make a new material, call it light. And I'll give it some emission, make the emission yellow. And give it some intensity here, you know, stuff that you would normally give a light. And now I'm gonna go and drag this over here, and obviously we aren't gonna see the glow yet because I'm not inside of I don't have post-processing in this window, but it will look way better soon. The first thing I'm gonna do though is I'm gonna set this Y value to be, let's say 7 is gonna be a good ceiling height. Or maybe I'll go crazy and say 10. Yeah, I think 10 might be alright. And this is going to be where our roof of the room is going to be, because we want our light to be on top of the roof, or mounted onto the ceiling, sorry. So I think that should be fine. This is a good light. The next thing I'm going to do is create an actual light object here. So I'm going to go to light, create a point light, and I'll drag it up a little bit. This should be fine right here. Just at like 5 or 6, like halfway. That should be alright. I'll change the color, make it a little bit more yellow. Alright, nice. And now last thing I'll do, and this is really important, I'll change the range to 7, since that's the size of the room. The room size is 7, so I'll change the range to 7, so that if you have another room, the lights aren't like in each other. They're like they're equally gapped. They're equally spaced. And alright, now that we've done that, we can go ahead and hop into our script. And I want to go ahead and create another list of game objects here. And I'll just do this by duplicating the existing list like this. And I'm going to name this one light type. And I'll of course make it plural. And this is going to be the prefabs that spawn in our rooms to give light. And I'm also going to go ahead and add a new integer here, and I'm going to call this the map brightness. And this is going to be the chance of a light type spawning in. So the map brightness as listed is going to be the chance of a light type spawning in, which would therefore, if we have more brightness, it will make the map brighter. Less brightness will make the map darker. Simple as that. I'm also going to do a little bit of just organization here. Create a header. Call this the settings. And I'm going to make another header. Here, I'll make this there. I'll make another header up here and call it the references. Of course, make a reference. So when we come out of this script, we're also going to create another slider, and it's going to be called the brightness slider. So I want to make a reference to that, and I want to go to the void update method and say the map brightness equals the integer value of the brightness slider dot value. So now we have to also create another enum at the top and call this the public enum generation state, which allows us to basically create layers on top of the map and tell the script, oh hey, first I want you to generate the ground, next I want you to generate the lighting, and etc and etc. So let's go ahead and create two states here. I want to create the none state, or the idle state. I want to create the generating rooms state, and if I make this a bit bigger so you can see it, I also want to create the generating lighting state. Next I want to go over to the settings, and I want to go ahead and at the very bottom create a public generation state, current state. And this is going to be our current state. I'll just write it, the current state of generation. So if you come back to our generating world method, we're going to want to go ahead and say, right before this for loop, I'm going to say for int state equals 0, state less than, we currently have what, 3 states. So I'm going to say state less than 3 and state plus plus. So this will basically allow us to cycle through each of the existing states. So now that we have this, I guess we should actually create some kind of system that allows our state to update. And we're going to do this by just coming to the end of this for loop here. And we're going to call a new method that says next state. So of course this script hasn't been made yet, so we're going to have to come down and create a new method, say public void next state. And this is going to basically just say current state plus plus. And we're also going to have to do some resetting of some variables here. So current position x equals 0, current position z equals 0, current position equals vector 3.0, and we're also going to have to say current position tracker equals 0. So I'll bring this up a little bit just so it looks better. And this basically resetting our variables, and this one goes to the next state. Now, of course, we actually have to use this state. So to actually use this, I'm going to come up here and make a new switch case method. And I'm going to say switch current state. Right before the instantiation of our room type, I'm going to say switch current state. And I'll put this n bracket over here. And next, I'm going to go ahead and say case, let's say generation states dot generating rooms. And I'm going to put a colon here. And right after this instantiation, I'm going to put a break here. So that's pretty much everything that we have to do for that. So this is basically going to say if our current state equals generating rooms, then it's going to generate a room type. But if it's not, then we want to come and duplicate this first of all. And we want this to say generating lighting. And if it's generating lighting, we want it to generate a light type of the light types dot count. So that should basically allow us to tell our script to either generate the rooms or generate the lighting, depending on the current state. So hop back over to our script, and we can kind of see this in action once we assign our reference here. So let's assign our light type to the light types array here. And we can also go ahead and come up to our canvas. Let's go ahead and zoom in on this right up here. And our map emptiness, we can duplicate our map emptiness slider, bring it down. And let's change this name to say map brightness. And I'm also going to change this in the hierarchy to say brightness slider. Now I can go to our generation manager, assign the brightness slider, and everything should be assigned. Now I'm also going to set this default to be a little bit lower, say 4, and that should be nice. If I just generate this with the current map size, we see that our brightness actually generates a whole lot of lights, which is concerning because we want our lights to randomly generate. We don't want them to just generate for each room. Otherwise it would be really bright, and I don't know, it would probably be laggy on your CPU as well when you start having thousands of lights. So let's implement some code that basically tells our script not to generate it for each of the rooms, but it actually gives a chance about whether or not it should generate. Now to do this, we're going to hop back over to our script. We're going to come over to our generate lighting method case here, and we're going to create an int should or chance of, let's just say light spawn. And we're going to say this equals random.range, let's say 0 through map brightness. And now we're going to say if, actually, sorry, this is going to have to say -1. So -1 through map brightness. Now if our light spawn equals 0, then we can instantiate this. Or else it's just not going to instantiate a light at all. So that should allow us to actually control our brightness rather than it just being super bright and generating in each of the rooms, which could be pretty laggy on your computer as well, since you're gonna have thousands of lights. I'm gonna make the map size stupidly big, and I'm gonna make the map emptiness a little bit less. I'll make the map brightness smaller, and if I press generate, as you'll see, once again, yep, that is a lot of lights. So the first thing that we want to do is go ahead and create 2 new prefabs, and we're going to create the spawn prefab for the spawn room and the prefab for the exit room. And to create the spawn room prefab, I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate this red room type, and I'll rename it to let's say spawn room. I'm also going to create another prefab by duplicating this. I'm going to call this one exit room. And I'm going to double click into spawn room to open it, and we can see it's red. I'm just gonna, for now, I'm just gonna put a little smaller cube on top of this, just like this, and I'm gonna give it another color just so that we absolutely know. Oops, I'm gonna give it here. I'll give it this color. I just want to make sure that we absolutely know that this is the spawn room here, so that it's really clear when we see it spawned in the game. So this is what I'm gonna do for the spawn room. I'm going to come into the exit room, and I'm going to do something really similar. I'll create a smaller cube here. I'll make the bottom of it green. Oops. I'll drag the green material here. And then, of course, I'll keep this one. I keep doing that. I'll make this one blue. There we go. Alright. This is the exit room. This is the spawn room. And now we have 2 prefabs. So let's hop back into the back end here. And we want to create, first of all, a reference to these prefabs. So I'm going to say serialized field, game object, spawn room, and exit room. Their names are self-explanatory. And now if I save this game and head back into Unity, I want to assign these right away so I don't forget about them. So let's hop over here, go to this, assign it to the, oops, I have to wait for it to compile. When it's done compiling, I'm going to go ahead and assign everything. Alright, that took an excessively long amount of time, but I'm going to go ahead and drag the spawn room prefab over to the spawn room in the hierarchy, or in the inspector, and I'll drag the exit room to the exit room in the inspector, and now we have everything assigned so I can't possibly forget about them. So let's hop back into the backend, and in our enum for generation states, I want to add 2 new states here. I want to add generating spawn and generating exit. So these are self-explanatory, but for now, right now, we just have states for when it's generating the rooms and generating the lighting. But since we want to have spawning and exiting, we have to create those 2 states here. So let's come down to our generate world method here, and we're gonna actually create some new script that's gonna handle the spawning of the exit and the spawn rooms, which are not dependent on the world grid. They're actually gonna be dependent on something a little bit different. I'll get into that later. But because they're not going to be dependent on the world grid, we don't need to worry about using the map size. So I'm just going to close this here, and we're not going to need this at all. But we want to come out to where it says next state, and outside of this for loop here, this is where we're going to be working on our script. So I'll come down a little bit from next state, and I'm going to go ahead and create a switch case method. So the switch is going to be for the current states, and the cases are going to be for generation state.generating exits. And I'm going to break it, and as well as the case for the generation state.generating spawn, and I'm going to break this too. Now for both of these, what we're actually going to be doing is taking the position of an already existing room in our world grid and just replacing it and spawning either a spawn room or an exit room over it. And what we want to do is just go up to the top of our script. And I'm going to create a new list here, a private list of game objects, and it's going to be called the generated rooms. And these are going to be the rooms that were already generated. And it's actually, I'll just say storing the rooms that were already generated. Okay, so this will store that data for us. So now we can access it by coming over to our initial switch case method here about the generating rooms and the generating lighting. And in the instantiation, we actually want to say generated rooms dot add, and now we put our instantiation inside of this, and of course we have to put in a closing parenthesis after that. So there we go, we have our generated rooms dot add, and this is essentially going to keep our generated rooms as an index. Now if we come down to this second switch case method here, we want to hop into generating exit, and I'm going to say int room to replace equals random.range 0 through generated rooms.count. And this is essentially going to give us a random room to replace out of our already existing rooms, just so it's more fluid. So now what we want to do is go ahead and say game object exit room equals instantiates our exit room prefab with a capital E at the generated rooms dot room to replace dot transform dot position, and we also want to pass in our quaternion dot identity and the world grid as the parent. Next we want to go ahead and say we want to tell our script to destroy the generated rooms room to replace. And now we want to say we want to assign our new room, which is the exit room, by saying generated rooms room to replace equals exit room. And I believe that's all we need to do. So let's go ahead and copy this script here, paste it in our generating spawn area, and we want to change some values. Let's just say spawn room. Let's change this to say spawn room, and we want to change this to say spawn room as well. And last thing we want to do here, just so that we don't get any conflicts, we want to say integer underscore room to replace equals random.range 0 through generated rooms.count. Now let's add an underscore to the front of this, add an underscore to the front of this, and an underscore to the front of this. There. So this is all we need to do, and this will allow us to generate an exit and generate a room. Now we do receive an error here saying there's an object reference not set to a reference of an object. Now to fix this, I'm just going to hop into my script here. I'm going to change the states to say 5. So in this initial for loop, it says states was less than 3. I want to make it so it says less than 5. That's really important. Now I'm going to come back to the top here, and I want to make the public this list here, this private list of generated rooms. I want to make this a public list so that we can see it in the hierarchy, in the inspector, which therefore makes it not null. So here we have this here. We have generated rooms array, which should be working now. And if we just hop over here into our game, press play, we should see that our generated rooms array does some things. Let's press generate, and there we go. We see we have 256 rooms, which was the room size. And we also see, and you may have noticed it, that, let me turn this off, that there's a spawn room here, or this is the exit room, as well as, where's the spawn room? Is this the spawn room? There's 2 exit rooms. So it just spawned 2 exit rooms. I believe it could have just been a part on the back end here. Yep, I remember exactly what I did wrong. Let's hop back down to our generating spawn area here. I put exit room as the thing that should be spawned for the spawn room, whereas it's supposed to be the spawn room that should be spawned here. I have a feeling there's going to be some problems around here in my Discord server. But yeah, that actually is a reminder. If you have any problems, like if you missed a part where I actually fixed one of the errors, please feel free to come into my Discord server and we can fix the errors. But if you have other things to do and you don't want to ask for help, I understand. Go ahead and head over to my Patreon, and you can download the source code to this project. So you don't have to code it yourself, you can just copy over the source code. However, I do hope that you read the comments that I put in here and at least kind of go through the video so that you know what the source code actually does. Otherwise, you've just downloaded source code without actually knowing what it does. And as nice as it is not having to code it yourself, you don't know what this code does. So let's hop back over to Unity now, and I want to go ahead and press play. And hopefully we should see that our spawn room and our exit room should be spawning. And I'm actually going to make this map size a little bit bigger here. And alright, so if I come over here, we see that our exit room, oh gosh, it's hard to find. There's our exit room right here, the green one, and here's the spawn room, the pink one. And they both spawn in the same line, which is probably going to be a really rare thing since last time we had them both on the opposite side of the map. But alright, we've got spawn room functionality. Now what we're going to do with this when we actually get our player in here is we're going to make it so our player can spawn here, or that our game knows exactly where it should spawn our player, and that our game knows exactly where or what to do when our player reaches the exit room. So let's start doing that now. Now that you've downloaded the standard assets from my Google Drive in the description of the video, I'm going to hop over to the Generation Manager, and I want to go ahead and add in a new reference here at the very top. I'm going to add in a new reference to my player, game object, player objects. And I'm also going to add in a new reference to something called the main camera object. And these should be two references that we're going to use in the future. Now we want to create a new public void for spawn player. And essentially all we want this to do is we want to set our player object active, so player object.setActive equals true, and a main camera object the set equals false. And then before we do this with our player's activation, we want to say a very important line of code, or a very important few lines of code that are actually going to require us to first of all turn our player object off. And this is going to be a little bit of wacky code, but essentially we have to have the player object and its scripts off, otherwise we can't change the position of it. It will just always lock the position. Now to set the position of the player object spawn location to the spawn room, I want to say public game object spawn room, and then we want to go ahead and delete this here. So now it's actually referring to this game object that we've just created right here. And now we can just say player object dot transform dot position equals spawn room dot transform dot position, and that's just going to set the position. So I believe there might be one more thing that we have to do here, but for now, as far as I can see, this should be working. So let's hop back into Unity. I want to assign my character object to the script. So to do that, I'm going to come into standard assets, go to characters, first person controller, prefabs. I'm going to drag the prefabs, the first person controller into the scene window. I'll set it to 000 just for convenience sake. And I'm going to come into my generation manager, drag it over to player object, drag the main camera over to the main camera object, and I'm going to set the FPS controller off on default. So now if I come into my game, we should observe the effects of a method that has no way to be accessed because we haven't created a button for it yet. So let's go ahead and actually create a button to spawn in our character. And to create this button, we're just going to come up to our canvas window here. And I'm going to duplicate one of these buttons, say the reload button, drag it down a little bit, and I'm going to give it a color. So I'll give it this color here, and I'll change the name of it to spawn button. Come inside of it, change the text to say spawn. Or actually, yeah, I think spawn will work. You can change it to say what you want, but for me, I'm just going to say spawn. I'll make the method GenerationManager.spawn player. So because this is where our character spawned, we're going to actually have to give it a little bit of code just to make it spawn a bit higher up. And we might have to do some modification to this object right here. But essentially we're just going to want to spawn it its height above the ground, and its height is 1.8. So if we give it 1.8 of leeway to spawn, it won't clip into the ground and clip off of the world into the actual backrooms down there somewhere. So let's first of all, before I forget this, let's hop into our assets window, go to our prefabs, enter our spawn room prefab. I want to delete the box glider off of this object here. Right click it, go down to remove component, and I want to save my scene again. And now if I come back over to our game, or sorry, our backend, we want to come over to spawn player and change this to say new vector 3 spawn room dot transform dot position dot x to f, actually let's say 1.8 f, and spawn room dot transform dot position dot y. Go to the very end, and we want to change this to say spawn room dot transform dot position dot z rather than transform dot position dot y. So if we hop back over to our game, everything should now be working now that we made that very small change. This really shows you how every single detail that you put into your script matters. So let's press generate, let's press spawn, and we spawn, yep, we spawn right in the center of our spawn room, which is exactly what we wanted. And geez, our height relative to the world is extremely small, but that should be fine. Now the last thing that we want to do is handle some kind of functionality with the exit room. And for now, to do this, I'm just going to go ahead and create a small trigger here. So I'm going to say this turn is trigger on, and I'm going to add components, add a script here, and we're going to call this exit room handling. So I'm creating a new script. Now I'm going to go ahead and press create and add, and this is going to conclude our exit room functionality right when we add some mechanics to this. So let's, as per usual, delete the start and the update method, and want to create some new functionality here. Let's say public void on trigger enter, and we want to say we want to go ahead and maybe create a reference to our generation manager first. So let's say private. Actually, we can do this inside of the method here. We'll say generation manager gm equals find object of type generation manager, and that will allow us to call some kind of method in here. So if we come to the very bottom, create a new method, say public void win or win game. We can then come to our exit room handling and say gm dot, or if I save this first, we can come to our exit room handling and say gm dot win game. That's all we need to do there. Now, in this functionality, for now, all I'm going to do is say debug.log game where player has exited and won the game. I'll also go ahead and say main camera dot set equals true and player objects dot set equals false. So this is important because, I mean, we need some kind of objective for our game, and I believe the best objective is just to have the player winning the game by getting out and finding the exit to the backrooms. Now, this is going to be hidden, and it's going to be what the player is working towards. If you want to add some kind of clock mechanic or some kind of timer, there are videos that will show you how to do that. But for now, I'm just giving you the method that allows you to build onto it later. All I'm doing with this video is really just showing you how to create infinite generation of the backrooms. But later on, after this video, I highly recommend that you go ahead and maybe add like a canvas that pops up that says you won the game, or something that's better than a debug.log statement. Suffice it to say, I'm just doing this because it's a tutorial, but I want you to add more onto yours when you have the time to. Like something, I don't know, some kind of like music should play, something, anything that makes the player feel satisfied with winning. Let's just come out of this, save our script or our scene, and I want to go ahead and come into it. And if we go ahead to our game and press generate, and we press spawn, we should see, yep, here's our exit room. And if we press this or touch it, yep, boom, we win our game and stuff starts to happen. Now the last thing I'm going to do here is win game method. In case you want to add on to this later, the cursor is going to be locked and it's going to be in the center of the screen, invisible. Let's just reset all of this by saying cursor.lock state equals none and cursor.visibility equals true. So that allows us to win our game, spawn into our game, and this is, believe it or not, this is pretty much our game complete. The last thing we'd need to do, and it's completely optional, is of course generating the barriers of the room. You thought I'd say actually creating the looks of the backrooms and the textures. No, that is the last thing that we do. Once we actually get the functionality down, then we can make it look good. But we need the barriers. This part is optional. You can skip over it to the part where I actually decorate the backrooms, or you can just you can get some barriers. And what I mean by barriers right now is it makes a lot of sense if you think about it. Right now, if we come into our game tab, I'm gonna maximize this, generate some map size here, spawn in, and I spawn at the edge. That might need to be fixed. But as you can see, there's an edge, and that's the problem. We can just walk off of the edge, and just like that, I've fallen off the backrooms. And now I don't really want my player to be able to do this, so I'm not going to allow them to. But I highly recommend that you add some kind of functionality, like a barrier, that prevents this. Now to do this barrier, I've already created some script that will allow us to create some kind of barrier for this. But gosh, I'm really just having a lot of fun running around our generation here. Going to the exit room and boom. Alright, so we're going to create a barrier that goes around all of the edges of our backrooms. It's just going to be a red prefab. Now to do this, let's first of all create the red prefab by coming over to prefabs and coming to room type, the red room type. I'm going to duplicate it, change this to say a room type or barrier. I'll just call it barrier. And I'm going to come into barrier and I will make this thing a little bit, I'll duplicate this cube here. And what I want to do is just make this really, really tall. Just really tall. Yeah, like as tall as possible. Like that. Later on, we're going to add a roof height. But for now, I just want this to be as tall as possible. Now I want a reference to this in my script. So I'm going to come up here. I'll say serialized fields, game object, B room. And this is going to be called the barrier room type. And if we come down, if we come up to our enum, I want to add a new state here called generating barrier. And of course add a comma after this. So let's come down to our first case method here, our switch case method. And this is the method that takes care of our generating rooms and generating lighting. And we want to go ahead and say case generation states dot generating barrier break. So I'm going to add a new integer up to the top here. And this is just going to say current room. And this is going to scale from 0 to the map size. So I'm going to put right here int current room ++. And in my next state method, I'm going to say current room equals 0. All right, so that's going to reset that. Now, if I come into my generating barrier method, what I'm going to say in here is if the current room is less than or equal to the map size square and the current room is not or is greater than or equal to 0, then I'm going to generate a barrier. And of course, we're going to have to implement this script later. Next, we want to say if the current room is less than or equal to the map size and the current room is greater than or equal to the map size minus the map size square, then we're also going to want to generate a barrier. Now this is going to be for the bottom, and this is going to be for the top of our map. Now we also want to come over to our area where our ticker goes back to the very front. And right at the very beginning of this, we want to say if the current state equals current or generation state dot generating barrier, we want to generate a room. Or sorry, we want to generate a barrier. Now this is going to happen at the right of the map. Next, we want to just duplicate this and put it at the very end right here, and this is going to happen at the left of the map. Now we want to come up to the top, or actually let's go to the bottom and create a new public void generate barrier. And what we're going to do in here is generate the barrier room at the current position. The first thing I want to do is go ahead and pass in the current position. So current position equals new, I want to say current position dot x 0 and current position z. Next I want to instantiate the barrier room or B room at the current position at the quaternion dot identity in the world grid. And that's everything we need to do. So if we hop back over to Unity, we have to assign the barrier to our generation manager, and upon doing that, we should see, oh, of course we have to wait for this to compile, and man, I am starting to lose my voice. All right, let's go ahead and assign the barrier to our barrier room in the in the inspector. We can save our scene now, come into our game tab, and press play, and we should see that around the outside, a type of red barrier is created, and it's going to be very distinct if it works. I'm not sure if it's going to work, so let's press generate, and we see, ooh, that's that's not a good sign. I do believe it's because we need to go over to our states here and add one more. So we said 5, yeah, we want to say 6 instead. So let's go to our generate world method, the very first for loop here where it says for int state equals 0, state less than it used to say 5. We want to change this to say 6. So state less than 6, state plus plus. Generate, and boom. If I go ahead and press spawn, we can see that there is a clear barrier around our map here. But yeah, this is looking pretty good so far. So the next thing we're going to be doing is actually adding our textures, adding our models, and really getting the rooms to actually look like the backrooms. And to do this, let's hop over to the Google Drive and go ahead and download the textures that I've imported into the drive. In case you think they're sketchy, feel free to come into the textures and see that all of the textures are in here. It should give you a textures.zip folder. You can go ahead and open it, and it should give you the textures that you downloaded. So I'm going to be using these textures at least in my game, but you can use whatever textures you want. So I'm going to go ahead and hop into the assets window and import these textures. Right click, press import new asset. I'm going to drag the textures folder into the assets window here, just like that. Now we have this folder here. So let's go ahead and open up our prefabs that we had previously, and you'll see here that we have all these prefabs, and let's be honest, they don't look like the backrooms at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just click this one right here, and then shift click the last one right here, or actually the second to last one, and I'm just going to delete all of them except for one. And now we just have this one standard room type here, and you'll see inside of our generation manager script that all of the room types are null. And this is as to be expected. So we're gonna go ahead and create a whole bunch of new room types. So in fact, I'm tempted to just go ahead and remove the spawn room and the empty room, but don't remove those two. We're gonna be just rebuilding those ourselves. But yeah, let's hop into this last room type that we kept here, and this is the empty room. So what this room is gonna need is it's gonna need a roof and a floor texture. So let's just go ahead and do that. And if we hop into our textures window here, we see that we have a few textures. I'm going to drag the carpet texture on here. I think it looks fine, but it could use a lot of conditioning. So I'm going to click into the material here, I'll make the tiling maybe like 4x4 or 3x3. I think 3x3 looks fine. I'm also going to give it a little bit of metallic, maybe a little bit of smoothness, not too much though. And I believe that should be everything here. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this. Or actually, I'm going to call this floor. Now duplicate the floor and rename it to room. Or sorry, roof. Shoot. And I'll drag this to the top. Now if I go ahead and assign my roof texture to this, you can see that there's a roof texture. I believe I can come in here and just do the same thing I did with the other one by giving it a 4x4 tiling maybe. Or no, I think I'll do 3x3, 2x2 maybe. I think 2x3, 2x2 should look fine. So here's our problem. With this empty room here, the roof height needs to be the exact height that we want our lights to spawn at. Because our light needs to spawn on the roof. We don't want it to spawn above the roof, under the roof, or in the roof. So let's go ahead and I'm just going to remove a little bit of height from this, just like that. Now I want to go ahead and make sure that this light type that we have here in our prefabs window is of the same height as the roof. So I'll go ahead and just drag this light type into the scene, center it at 0, 0, 0. And as we can see, our light is really high up once it's centered at 0, 0, 0. So I'm just going to drag this roof all the way up here, just like this. So now the light is actually on the roof, just like that. I can go ahead and delete this light type now. It's really important that we delete that from our editor here. And here we go. Here's our empty room. It is this big, it is that high, and it has no walls. The last thing that I might want to do here actually is I might want to add a pillar to this. So to add a pillar, I'm just going to duplicate the floor. I'll make it smaller, just like this, and I'll make it a whole lot taller. Hold on, I want to make sure this is a square right here. I'll just change it to 1, 1, 1. Now I'll make it a lot taller just by clicking this one here, the rect tool, dragging it up like this. And now I want to go ahead and assign my wall texture to this. And as we can see, it's really squished looking. So we can fix that by just coming over here once it's selected and changing the tiling. So I think I might give it a really small tiling, like 0.2. Is that fine? Yeah, 0.2 to 1. Actually, I'll give it like 0.3. Yeah. Now, the last thing I want to do here, maybe make it a little bit smaller first before I go on. I'll change it to 0.7 to 0.7. Of course, you can change it a lot more than me. I'm just kind of doing it for the tutorial. The last thing I want to do here is just kind of duplicate this, bring it down a little bit, make it look a little bit better here. Just like that. Now it kind of looks like it has a base. And I can do the same thing and bring it to the top. So if I do this, oops, let's bring it all the way up to the top. As you can see, it kind of looks a little bit better. It looks like it has a base and a bottom piece. So I'll just drag these two things, the bases, to the pillar here. I'll rename this to say pillar, and I'll rename both of these to say base, just like that. Alright, so here's a pillar. And for the empty room, I think I'll just go ahead and make 2 of these pillars, one on either side like this. And obviously you can change this to look a lot more different, change it to make it look what you actually want it to look like. But I think this is what I'm going to do for this. Actually, even if I give it a little bit of offset, I think that might look actually, yeah, a lot better than what I was planning on doing. Yeah. Okay, so I think this looks pretty fine. Yep, I'm trying to just convince myself that it looks fine. I think this is good now. So here's our empty room. Next thing we wanted to do is go ahead and create a room that actually has walls. And to do this, I'm going to come back to my prefabs window here, duplicate the empty room, and rename this to say room type 1. And I'll come inside of this. As you can see, it looks the exact same as the empty room, but we don't want that. So I'll go ahead and delete both of these pillars. And what I want to do to make a wall is just go ahead and right click in here, create a new 3D object, create a cube, and I'll center this to 0, 0, 0. And now as you can see, we just have a cube here. I want to kind of drag this up a little bit, and we're just going to make a wall here. So I'm just going to kind of make a basic wall, drag this to make it like a rectangle, make sure it is the same size as the floor. The floor is what, 7 by 7, so this also needs to be 7 by 7. Well, it doesn't need to be 7 on the Z because it doesn't need to be a cube. So I'll do that, and I'll make sure once again that it is centered at 0, and I believe that should be fine. Here's a wall. So yeah, this looks alright. So what we want to do now, if I just make sure that it doesn't have a gap at the bottom, because that could be a problem. Just like that. And there's a gap on the top. I have to fix that as well. So here's a wall here. What I want to do now is just go ahead and kind of give this a texture here. And to do that, I'm going to come back to our textures folder, open it, and drag the wall texture over to it. As we can see, it looks really weird and unnatural. So I'm going to fix that by coming to its material, giving it some tiling, maybe or actually I don't want to change this because it's the texture that's being used for the pillars. So to make sure that we're not using the same one that we use for the pillars, I'm just going to right click this, create a variant, and now we can change the tiling of this variant. So I'll come over to this and change the tiling to maybe 2 by maybe 2. I think this maybe 2 by, if I just keep playing with this here, yeah, I think 2 by whatever this number is looks fine. Of course, please keep playing around with this to make it fit your liking. Maybe if I give it a little bit of less of this. I think this is fine. This is just a tutorial. You can make this look however you want. So this is what I'll do for this wall here. I'll rename this to say wall. And I'm going to do the same thing I did for the pillar. So I'm going to duplicate the wall, make it a little bit bigger, and then just drag it down just like this. And that looks fine. And of course this doesn't matter, and whatever is happening down here doesn't matter because the player is not going to see it. It doesn't matter what's happening at the bottom or the top because the player just isn't ever going to see that. All they see is what's happening in the middle here. So I'll go ahead and duplicate this here, bring it to the top, just like this, bring it up, just like that. Maybe I want to just leave it here like this, or no, I'm going to bring it like this to the very, very top. Yeah, I think that looks fine. Of course, you can keep playing around with this, but I think this is what I'm going to have as a wall here. So I'll drag, just the same as I did with the pillars, I'll drag these two wall parts here into the wall. I'll rename this to base, and there we go. We have one wall, and this is going to be one of our room types. So just to show you what happens with our game here if we only have this one room type, I'll go ahead and add this to our generation manager. So to do that, I'll click into my assets window, go to the prefabs, click generation manager, and change the room types to 0. Now I can just drag this room type 1 over to room types. And I can save my game, go into the game window, and I'll press play. And as you'll see here, we're immediately going to have an effect that makes it look a lot better. So I'll go ahead and press generate. And wow, that looks interesting. And if we come into it, as you'll see, it looks kind of weird. And that is because I gave way too much softness to the carpet here, clearly. So let me come into the carpet texture. I'm going to drag this soft smoothness down to 0. Carpet should not be smooth at all. Now as you'll see, it looks really pillary. There's a lot of pillars going on, and that is to be expected because all we have right now is this one room type and a pillar. But as we have less room types, we're gonna see more of an effect here. And actually, just to kind of show you that, I believe what we can do is just reload this, give it way less emptiness, press generate, and yeah, immediately we see that there's a way bigger effect here. We see a bunch of walls, we see a bunch of just randomness, but it still doesn't look like the Backrooms, and that is because we don't have any other kind of walls. It just looks like a bunch of just like weird, just straight things happening. And also we can see that there's appears to be like light coming down from the ceiling, and there's like it looks so bad in here. So let's go ahead and start fixing this. The first thing that we want to do is, first of all, create some new room types. And I'm going to duplicate this one here, rename this to room type 2. Actually, I'll make this a bit bigger so you can see it. I've renamed this to say room type 2. I'll come into this, and for this room type, I'm just going to go ahead and rotate this wall just like this. And if you remember, our game is going to randomly choose which of these room types it wants to spawn. So previously we had it doing colors, now we're just going to have it doing walls. So it's pretty simple if you think about it. We're just choosing a random room type to spawn. So this is what this room type is going to be. Now go ahead and duplicate this room type, rename it to 3. I'll come into 3, and I'll move this wall over like this, bring it over like that, and kind of move it over a little bit like this. There we go. So this is what I'm going to have as the third room type. And maybe just make sure that this is centered there. Now I'll duplicate this again, change this to say 4, and for this one I'm going to go ahead and rotate this once again, and then center it at 0 on the Z. 0 on the Z, just like that. Now if I bring it over here, we now have our fourth room type. So immediately we're going to see an effect here, but I want to add in more room types. I don't think that these 4 are going to be enough. So what I'm going to do for this 5th room type is I'm going to add a wall on, I'm going to make this a kind of corner here, just like this. And I'll bring it to 0 on the X, and I'll just kind of drag it like this, just like that. So I think that's going to make an effect. And actually, just for even more effect, I can maybe make this into like, actually nah, I'll keep this as the 5th room type. It's pretty simple. Now if I duplicate this room type, change it to say 6, I can come in here, rotate both of these, bring them both over, just like that, and then bring it to the other corner here. And now as you can see, we have basically just the opposite of room type 5. So here's 5 and here is 6. So okay, yeah, it looks slightly different. So I believe I'll do one more room type, and this is going to be room type 7. And for this room type, I'm going to make it kind of weird looking. I'll go ahead and maybe make it like this, really small here. I'll just make a bunch of smaller corners, just like this. Duplicate this, and actually this looks a little bit squished. So for me, I'm gonna have to create a variant for this material, fix the tiling a little bit, so give it less tiling, just like this. I believe that looks fine. Of course, you don't have to do that. Your game doesn't have to look like that, but I'm gonna do that for me. Now I'm gonna go ahead and duplicate this wall, bring it over to look like this. And again, because I'm doing this, but you don't have to do this too. I just want my game to be, I want it to have a lot of room types and a lot of variety. So I'm going to click both of these walls, duplicate them, bring it to this other corner, just like this. And I'm going to rotate this whole thing over, just like that. And then we kind of have a mirrored effect of the other one. So here we go. And now I'm also going to duplicate it again, rotate him. I believe, okay, I'll have to kind of do some different things here. If I just drag this one to be like this, there we go. I can bring it over here. And once again, your room types do not have to look the exact same as mine. It doesn't matter what these look like, honestly. You can make yours look however that you want them to look, but this is just how I want mine to look. So now if I just go ahead and maybe change this, rotate it like that, I have a whole bunch of corners. And this is going to be my room type 7. Okay, it looks pretty fine. Actually, I think I'll add one more. And this is going to be I promise this will be the last room type that I'll add. And I'm just going to make this, move it just to the center like that. And that's going to add a little bit of variety in our generation. Okay, so let's come back. Once you finish making your room types, you might need to pause the video while you make all your room types, because I understand I did that a little bit quick, because I've done this a lot of times, but you're going to need to pause the video and kind of make your own room types to make them how you want them to look. But I've made my room types here. I'll go ahead and drag each of them to the generation manager here. So I'll just drag them like this. Drag 5, 6 here, 7 over here, and 8 over here. So now all of my room types are assigned. And if I go ahead into my game here and I play my game, we're gonna see that we have a little bit of an actual Backrooms looking thing going on. I'm gonna bring my map emptiness all the way down here, and I'll make it a little bit brighter, and I'll press generate, and geez, oh gosh, as you can see, it looks ridiculous. It's already, I might need to actually make a kind of cap about how big you can make your map, just so it doesn't lag your computer. But as we can see here, yes, this does kind of look good, somewhat. If I join the game, there is still a problem, evidently though. First of all, in our spawn location, it just looks like this. There's no roof here. Second of all, the sun is really messing up our Backrooms. As you can see here, you can really see the sun there. So to do that, I'm gonna go ahead and do something a little bit different here. I'm gonna go ahead and delete the directional light. Just delete it. And now I'll come over to our lighting settings here. And this is just to fix the lighting. I'm gonna come over to our environment, change or just delete the skybox, change the real-time shadow color to black, and I'm going to delete the intensity multiplier on the environment reflections. I'm also going to turn off fog if you haven't already, and I will change the environment lighting from skybox to a single color, and I'll make the color black. Next, for our main camera, I will simply change the skybox color. What is this? Yeah, the background type. I'll change this to a color, solid color. And you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but I'm gonna make mine just this nice bluish color here. It kind of looks like it's a void or some kind of vacuum in space. So that looks fine. All right. So now that we have made some significant changes here, actually I might make this a little bit darker just because I'm a little bit picky when it comes to this kind of stuff. Of course, it doesn't matter what you do with yours. But now that we've made those changes, if we come into our game here, we should immediately see that our game is going to be a lot darker. So let's press generate, and wow, that looks a lot better somewhat. We'll see a small problem here, and yes, there it is. All right, that looks beautiful. So ignoring this patch in the sky here, which is the spawn location, we can immediately see that this place looks wicked. If I go ahead and just respawn myself, or just create a new scene, reload the game here, and if I make the map a lot brighter by bringing the brightness slider this way, and I'll make it a little bit emptier, and I'll make the map size a little bit bigger. If I press generate, spawn, as you can see here, and I'll maximize this. Here is our Backrooms. Gosh, this is looking pretty good so far. Now I really like how the border looks. It looks kind of red. It looks really, really wicked. So I might keep it like that. I might not change it to look like the wallpaper texture, but you can change your barrier to look like the wallpaper texture. Even though, gosh, this looks really cool. If I just kind of run around in here for a while, we're gonna see that it is pretty hard to see. It's pitch black. You can't see around. There's no flashlight, and that's the problem here. You don't have a flashlight. So we will be giving our character a flashlight so that they can actually see around. But gosh, you have to admit, this looks pretty good. And of course, I only have these glowing effects because I'm using the universal render pipeline, but you may need to modify your game to actually support that. So So I'm gonna go ahead and exit out of my scene here. And the first thing I wanna do is hop it back into my prefabs. And I'm gonna go down to my spawn room. And currently it looks pretty mid. There's nothing really happening here. And to change this, I'm just gonna go ahead and import my room type, my empty room type. And I'll drag this to 000. And I think that will just keep our spawn room as just the empty room. I think that would look alright. So to do this, I'll go ahead and delete these two boxes here. And here's our spawn room. I might give just a little bit of distinction that this is where the player spawned in at, simply by, I don't know, making some pillar design here. There's a whole bunch of pillars now. It looks kind of cool. I might even give it a little bit of a glowing effect. Of course, at this point, we're just kind of playing around. We're making this look how we want it to look. We've already made the game. We're just kind of making the assets for it at this point. But here's our spawn room. I'll give it a nice bluish glow here. So for the exit room, this is going to be a little bit different. We're going to come and find it first of all. Here it is. I'm going to go ahead and drag in my room type 5. Actually, I'll drag in room type 7. I'll center it at 000. And then I'll delete the green one here. But I will keep in this bluish thing here. I'll make it a little bit bigger. Actually, I'll not mess with that yet. Now I'll make sure to unpack this prefab like that so that we can modify this. And the way in which I'm going to modify it is by just making this a real wall. And to do that, I'm going to just bring this over. So in case you're not aware, this is going to be the exit of the backrooms. So this is where we're going to need some kind of door or some kind of like significance that lets the player know that, hey, this is where you exit and this is where you should be looking for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and delete this wall here. I'll make this wall a little bit bigger. And I'll duplicate it and bring it over. And now I will bring it like this. And I'm kind of making a way for a kind of a doorway right here. So a place where the player can just easily find it and say, oh, hey, this must be the place where I need to exit at. So I think if the player runs into here, they should easily just see that there's a door here. And I'll duplicate that base, or sorry, delete that base right there. Maybe make this one smaller, bring it over a little bit, just like this. And yeah, I think this looks all right. So, oh, there's a gap here. Okay. So we do need to go to the asset store and get a nice door asset. And to do this, I'm just gonna hop into the asset store, and it's gonna send me over to the asset store. And what I wanna do is get two assets. I want to first of all get a door. So I'm gonna search for a door. And let's see here, what doors do we have? There should be like a really rusty, yes, here's a metal door. So I'll go ahead and import this into Unity. And I will add it to my game. Oops, it's not selected. Let me just go ahead and open it in Unity again, just like that. I'll import it into my game. Import. And now we have a door. So I'm gonna hop back into my prefab here for the exit room. And what I wanna do is hop into my doors area right here that I just imported in my assets window. I'll open it up. I'll go to prefabs. I'll drag in this door. And I'm gonna have to make this a lot smaller, but for now this should work. Here we go, I'll rotate it. And I want this to be on this wall. So I'll just make it a bit smaller here. Drag it in, make it a bit smaller, make it a bit taller. And I understand that the texture looks really bad right now. I will fix that. But here's our door right here. Now if I just select this material, it might only look bad for me because I'm using the Unity render pipeline. But if in case it looks bad for you too, you need to click this, go to, I believe it's File or Edit. Yes, it's Edit. Go down to Rendering, and you have to go to Materials and press Convert and Proceed, and that will make it actually work. And as we can see, the door looks really bad now that we've done that, so I have to go ahead and fix that. So There we go. And here's our door. Now, this is probably going to look bad in my game compared to the size of the player. So please, spend some time to make this look as good as you want. But I don't care about how it looks. I just care that it functions and that I show you how to do it. So next thing is we want to make sure that our trigger for the exit is actually a trigger for the door. And to do this, I'm just going to drag this trigger here over to, let me just fix this. I'll drag it over to the door. And again, this thing that has the exit room handling script is going to be the object that the player will need to touch in order for them to interact with the door and win the game. So I've made it the size of the door here. Next thing I'm going to do is turn off the mesh renderer. Just like that. And this is everything we need to do. And I believe this, believe it or not, might be our game complete. So I'll hop into my game here. Oh, of course, actually there's one last thing we need to do is, of course, we need to assign our camera over to our FPS controller. Sorry, not our camera, our light. So I'll select my FPS controller in the hierarchy, right click, create a light that is a spotlight. I will now bring this up a little bit taller to about where the camera is. Change the range to make it a little bit smaller, or I think that should be fine. I'll make this light white, or I think yellowish should be fine. This should be alright. I'll add more intensity, I'll add more spot range, and I'll change the cookie to have a flashlight cookie. So a menu should pop up here. I'm gonna search for cookie, and it should give me a bunch of like flashlight cookies. I'll just click this one right here since it's the best one in my opinion, and it gives us a cookie that will show up for our flashlight. Now I also believe I'll make this a little bit, give it a little bit more range, just like that, and that should be all right. Okay, so I believe our game might be complete. So if I hop into my game tab, I press play. I believe once this is done loading, if I go ahead and add, oh shoot, FPS controller is still active. You need to make sure that FPS controller is not on, just like that. Otherwise you're gonna get some problems. Okay. Now everything should be fine, I believe. I think I'll also change this to say solid color, no lighting, just for the FPS controller. And alright, let's play our game. So, if I add in some map size, I'll add in, or take away some of the map emptiness, I'll add some more map brightness, and I'll generate. And if I press spawn, as you can see, it's really bright because our game is currently calculating the shading. But when it stops being so bright, here we go. Yes, this is the spawn room. We gave it a nice bluish glow here. Here's our flashlight. It looks all right. And now I believe, yeah, we're in the backrooms. This is a barrier here. That's why it's so red. Of course, you can change that to actually be the wallpaper, but I'm actually gonna try to find the exit. I don't know how long it's gonna take me, but I'm hoping that I can find it soon. Oh, this is the exit right here. This is the exit. So here's an exit. If I go ahead and click into this, we'll see that I leave, it debugs, and it says player has exited and won the game. Now there's one problem that I want to address before I just send you off. Our game is super dark, and I want to, first of all, I want to assign the spotlight. I want to drag it into main camera. So I've just done this. I've dragged the spotlight into main camera in the FPS controller. That's pretty important. But second of all, I want to go ahead to my light type in the prefabs, and it's so dark that we're gonna actually need to update this. So to update it, I'll just drag the intensity up to about like 12. I think that should do the trick. Yeah, I think that should be fine. I might even like duplicate it, but I think this will be alright for now. I'm also gonna change the cap on the map size because I don't want them to be lagging their game so badly. I want to change the maximum value to be, I think I'll do think I'll do 10 instead of 18. Because what, let me see, 10 to the 4th power is 10,000? That's still a lot. I might go with 7, because 7 to the 4th power is what, 2,000 rooms? Sure, I'll do 7. Because I don't want to give our player, I don't want to force our player to crash their game or lag their game just because they generated the maximum value. Of course, you can keep your maximum value as high as you want though, I won't stop you. So I'll drag the map size to the maximum value. I'll bring the map emptiness down. I'll bring the map brightness down to its minimum, meaning it's going to be really bright. And if I press spawn, okay, it is brighter. It's not the brightest in the world. Oh, okay, there it is. Yeah, it's brighter. All right, it's brighter. Also, yeah, I think this actually should be fine. I don't think there's anything that I need to fix at this point in time. So this is the Backrooms. You might need to change the footstep sounds a little bit, but I think this is a pretty good procedural generation of the Backrooms. Now the objective here would be to find the exit, and to find it, I don't really have a strategy, but I believe it's somewhere in here. And again, you can actually go ahead and add procedural, or sorry, not procedural. You can add a monster, you can add entities, you can add all sorts of stuff into this. But for the most part, this should be it. Where is the exit? Where is the exit? Gosh, imagine trying to do this, but having a monster chasing behind you while you try to find the exit to the Backrooms. That would be pretty complicated and scary at the same time, which is always the goal in this type of stuff. Now, gosh, I cannot find the exit. And there's stuff all over my face. There we go. Okay. Where is that exit room? You know what, I'm realizing that I actually have my map size at 2,000. So finding the exit room could take a lot of time. I've been here for about what, like 5 minutes trying to find the exit room. So I believe having it at these higher values, the map size, look, it's pretty, yes, it is a lot of generation of the Backrooms. It's really big. Oh, here's the border. It's really big. However, the person that is playing the game is going to be really screwed if they want to pick one of these larger settings that you have for them, because a really large map size means, yeah, it's that much harder to find the exit. So I might quit, because I've been trying to find the exit for a while, and geez, it is difficult to find the exit. Let me try to come around here, maybe come around here. I'm trying to like find it while I'm still recording. I'm not sure if the exit even is anywhere near me. Okay. Gosh. Is that the exit? Is this the exit right here? No. Is it somewhere? Oh wait, is that the exit? Here's the exit, and we won the game. Okay, phew. Alright, so this is pretty much it. This is the procedurally infinite generation of the Backrooms. And if I come over to my world grid, we can see that if I disable my lighting, yes, this is our really big maze. This is the biggest setting that I have available on my game, but of course this thing can be as big as you want it to be. So yeah, have fun with this. I do recommend adding in chunk generation. I recommend adding in a timer on the top that shows you how long you've been speedrunning for. I recommend adding on a monster. Maybe even you could even use this to generate just a big map of the Backrooms. Then you can save this as a prefab and then use it to build onto an actual game of the Backrooms, like a swift storyline and everything. So you don't have to waste all your time building the Backrooms, because take it from someone who's made a 7-ending Backrooms game, making Backrooms maps, they're never easy. It takes a long time, and it takes a lot of planning. So yeah, this just gives you a map of virtually infinite size. Thank you very much for staying to the end. If you liked it, then please leave a like. If you want to make your own Backrooms game in a really polished tutorial that isn't nearly as long as this and is very optimal for beginners, please check out the Backrooms Game Lab. It will allow you to do that. It is in the description down below. Now, this has been how to create procedural generation of the Backrooms. I have been Developer Jake, and we will see you in the next one.